So what is the objective? What are we even doing here?
I think selfishly for me, I want to become an expert in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Like literally I'm starting from ground zero here. So
Okay.
I would like throughout these conversations and stuff to learn a bit more and actually be like a conversational expert with this stuff.
Totally. Yeah, me too. I'd like to be an expert too, because I'm definitely not, but we'll talk about how to be, good enough.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Really quick, Kenny, in the last episode, you said that you went and started a hedge fund. What was that like? Like we just kind of brushed over that.
Yeah. So I always had a super strong interest in investing, and I invested a lot. I read at a time, I think I've gotten a little bit sloppy on this, but at a time I read literally everything that came out of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway letters. I read everything from Charlie Munger. I read so many investment books, and then eventually I started dabbling and started, making large investments in things that I thought, had moats, things that were on sale and things that were underappreciated, and so, and had some marginal success on my own, like basically like when I look back, it's more like lucky idiot success, but I was just so interested in markets and just absolutely loved it. And so I was, that was kind of my side hustle, when I was working in cyberspace, as I was like learning everything there is to know about investing and like in public markets. And so I still have quite a bit of interest in that. But in order to operate at a high level, you really need to be, focused on, I don't know. You can't control markets, right? And so I've learned a lot of things, right? Most important thing, don't fight the Fed, and
manage your risks.
And so I've done that excellent, and I've also done it poorly. And when you do it poorly, it can be vicious, right? And so, definitely a huge interest of mine at a certain point, but I kind of like doing it for myself. Yeah.
That's so cool, man. I love investing and I find it so fascinating.
Yeah.
So you started this hedge fund and then you decided to move on and start a startup.
Yeah, I don't know.
I remember when this happened. I've been friends with Kenny for since college days, and I've been kind of following him. He ended up being friends with my brother. They were both at PwC, so that
Aaron's awesome.
Equated to more interactions. But
Hi, Aaron.
I remember I love macroeconomics. So when Kenny became hedge fund, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But one day randomly, and I hadn't talked to Kenny in a few years, he just called me out of the blue. And he had been a hedge fund manager, and he was like, oh, and I kind of asked him about it a little bit, but he's like, no, that's not why I'm calling you. And basically it was the birth of what he's doing now with Paramify at that time. And so he was like, hedge fund, that was kind of a side hustle, as he just said, and kind of something that he was intrigued by and interested in. But now this was something that he was so excited. He called me up and told me about it, and been following him ever since on kind of his journey. I think it's been 3 years or so since that happened. Mm-hmm. Something like that.
Yeah, totally.
So I'd love to hear more now that we're here.
Okay.
What led into that? Because it was like an aha moment. It was major excitement in classic Kenny style. It was like you had to move the phone a little bit away from your ear because he was like, he's so excited, so pumped.
Really? I didn't know that about me. I'm like, yeah. All right. That's hilarious. Yes. Cool, man. Yeah. So what happened? I don't know. Let's look back. So, absolutely super interested in investing. What happened was, someone actually offered me a ton of money. They would have easily been the biggest LP, like in the fund. And more skin in the game than me, and I was like managing my own money. That was kind of part of my model. I was like, hey, I want to win with you, and when you win, I win, and when you lose, I lose, that kind of thing. So I wanted, I care a lot about like skin in the game, right? And so someone asked me, if they could invest right in the fund, and I got just, instead of excitement, I just kind of had dread, right? I'm like, just thought I'm probably not going to be able to be the same. And I knew deep down that I was, pretty new and inexperienced, right? I hadn't really experienced a crazy drawdown. I'd taken advantage of some, sell-offs in the marketplace, lucky, but it's just hard, like, to go to cash and, it's just hard. And so I thought to myself, I'm probably not going to do this, anymore. But what happened was I was doing consulting engagements. And so what happened was I had an acquaintance come to me and ask if I could help organize their FedRAMP processes, because they were familiar with what I did with Adobe Common Controls. And for when we did Adobe Common Controls, like at Adobe, and we knew exactly how to implement it, it was really good, right? Because Adobe Common Controls is a list of statements, right, of control objectives. That access to systems is restricted to authorized personnel, something like that. Okay, that's like an important thing, right? We can talk a little bit about what are the basics of cyber, but something like that, that's what Adobe is full of those, right? And it goes all the way from access control all the way to Adobe is full of those. The Common Controls is full of those, right?
Yeah.
Starting with access, and you're going all the way down to physical security and data center availability, things like that. There's a lot, right, that goes into cyber, but we were trying to make those as easy as possible for the people that needed to stand up those capabilities, those services, for example, like access or, data centers, whatever that is. How do we make that really clear on what they're supposed to do? We'd map all of the compliance requirements to that, and then we would set those capabilities up as services so that other organizations within the company could use those services, so they didn't have to be in the business of authentication, for example. They didn't have to be in the business of setting up logging and security monitoring, but all of those are just based off of capabilities that have been set up by these little service providers within Adobe, or sometimes they're cloud service providers, and they're just using that service. But even then, there's responsibilities that everybody has within the organization to kind of implement those. So I had a lot of inside knowledge of how we did security at Adobe. And the problem is I would go to conferences and people would say, I can't use this to comply with PCI. And I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. I can, why not? And so I'd find out more.
This as in
Common Controls,
Common
right?
Controls.
Yeah, people said like, oh, I can't do that. I'm like, oh, why not? I'm like, you totally can. And, my old way was like, oh, no, you can't. And I didn't like really listen. But eventually I did like kind of listen to that feedback. And I said, oh, okay, maybe there's some things that we could have done better. Anyway, so that's kind of the background of what we had worked with people there, and they went on to other companies. And so they asked, hey, can you do something similar for FedRAMP where you can automate? And then we'd be, in particular, we'd be really interested in automating the deliverables, right? Using this framework. And I'm like, okay, so we contracted with them to do the deliverables, and on my own, I kind of built some prototypes that they could use. And so it's a matter of setting up a service. So let's say something like Okta. Okay, Okta is used for so many things, but Okta Verify in particular is a service that most companies use. A lot of big companies use for doing single sign-on, which is an important capability in security, right? So you're doing it in one place. And then the other thing that it's managing is multi-factor authentication, which is so important. We can talk a little bit more about why that's important if you care to do so. But those, so SSO, multi-factor authentication is Okta. And so my experience is that someone within the company has to do that. Okay, so like an IT team, they'll have to do that. And they have to configure it appropriately to meet the FedRAMP standard. Okay. So there's things they have to do, but there's a lot of things that Okta already does for you, right? And so that's what's so cool about, using that solution, Okta. It's already done, and it actually helps you. It's connected to 81 different spots in a DoD and a FedRAMP report. And so the idea is that, okay, let's configure that correctly, and let's make it super easy for people within the company to use that tool. And so the IT team is going to set up Okta for that particular company, and then they set it up and make it really easy for other teams like DevOps teams or HR or whoever it is to use that service, to consume it. Okay, and then now everybody's using Okta for authentication for everything. And so you don't have to handle it authentication in a different way for every single service that you're standing up, right? Just,
it's now a reusable service.
It's a reusable service, right? And so that was kind of the principle. They're called RIT solutions. RIT solutions are capabilities that security organizations have, or, just businesses in general. RIT solutions are capabilities that can be used over and over and over again to comply with regulations or to address risks that the company faces, right? So, anyway, that actually worked. Okay, so that prototype actually worked, and it worked with great success. And we did that for every single capability, and it
when
worked.
you were consulting, you're talking about.
Yeah, it worked, and it was pretty embarrassing, honestly. And for a time, I would go to, I'm just like, I'm not a coder, but I was coding a lot of this prototype. I'm not really good at it, but I've done it. I've even done it for Paramify. I hope, most of that's probably gone by now, hopefully. But there were times, during those engagements where like had not really much to report. I was working on, kind of constructing the solution. How am I going to do this and make it efficient and make it repeatable for my customers? And so they'd be like, hey, so Kenny, how's it going? I'm like, oh, it's going just fine. Anything to show us? And I'm like, no, don't have anything to show you, but I promise maybe in a couple weeks, right? And so, it started working. I was just working my butt off, right? By myself, and then kind of getting excited because I could see the implications of like how much this was going to change things. And so had great success, got through FedRAMP Moderate multiple times, and we did it for other packages. And it was simple enough, right? We would distribute these risk solutions to a single team, to like the DevOps team, or to the IT team, or to HR. Okay, you have a question, or were you gonna say something?
No, yeah, I was just a little curious with like what other packages were you able to like apply this to?
Well, now this is a prototype, and I built it, so scale is not a thing. But what we were able to do is within those companies that we could do different FedRAMP Moderate packages really well, right? Because all those risk solutions existed. And we were able to do it over and over, and it was consistent, and just had great success with that. Okay, then I'd kind of go on vacation, and I didn't really do much for my existing consulting business, like in terms of like website. I didn't even have a website ever for that one. I never did. And so people would find me on Facebook, and I had this like really lame logo, that I put together, and I thought it was kind of cool at the time, but when I look back, I'm like, oh, I don't. Anyway, people reached out to me and they said, hey, do you do SOC 2? And I'm like, oh, hey, I'll take you out to lunch. And maybe I do that. And maybe I do that. And they explained that they were using these automation software to automate their SOC 2, but it was still like a burden for them because they didn't really have it connected to their day-to-day business process. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, well, maybe I'll help you set that up so you can use it a little bit better. And we actually used the prototype that I had, and we use it there. And then I got another call that said, hey, can you help us with ISO 27001? Those numbers you were talking about.
There's a lot of numbers.
Yeah.
So many.
And like, oh my gosh, like it's pretty successful. It like worked. And the process just kept working over and over again. And then we got asks for doing, more complicated things, especially on like FedRAMP High and the DoD stuff. And I'm like, okay. At that point, I'm like, we need software for this because this is getting ridiculous, right?
What makes FedRAMP High like so much more complex than say like SOC 2 or?
Yeah. So, well, FedRAMP is no joke. Let's just start there, right? Like FedRAMP is a lot. It's really important. I think that we need to do better, right? Especially like companies that are doing FedRAMP. Like, man, we have a long way to go. It's really an important standard. It's not there just to be a documentation exercise. But the problem is that, when you look at an audit engagement, where does it start? An audit engagement starts with planning, okay? And that involves strategy, like what are we looking at? So this is just the audit. And then the next thing is field work, right? We're checking, is that firewall turned on? You're doing testing all the controls, looking for evidence that they're working. And then the third thing is the reporting. And reporting, in theory, should only be taking like what? Like the work's all done, just kind of document it. It should be like 15%, 10% of your time. Maybe, ideally that's what it is because it's like the least important thing.
Right.
Unfortunately, people, that's actually consumes most of their time, right? So you're not really focused on strategy. You're focused on like, oh, let's get evidence that the firewall is turned on. So it's just really a difficult documentation exercise. And when you have as many requirements as you do in FedRAMP, important requirements, they're there for a reason. They're not frivolous. It's just overwhelming, right, for humans, right? And so going from FedRAMP moderate to FedRAMP high, I had these templates that I had kind of generated, and then I'm like, oh gosh, I don't have a template for this. So now I'm going to have to refactor all of this. And like, anyways, I had been working on some software. You remember Adam, and I trying to get people to come on with me. And my co-founder, Tyler, who's working on some awesome things today for Paramify, he told me, hey, this seems like a super boring business. So I'm totally interested. I'm in, because he learned, to his credit, he learned it. But one of the things that I had already known about a little bit, but kind of rediscovered, and I talked about it with Tyler, was OSCAL, which is the Open Security Control Assessment Language, that we can use as kind of a standard for how we're going to structure our platform, right? So now I pretty much lost everybody, I'm pretty sure, on this podcast. This is so boring, right? But OSCAL became super, super important, okay? And I'm so happy for what that team that Dr. Michele Yorga and AJ have built, right? It's just it's an amazing standard that we have. And what that does is it's a way for us to standardize what controls should look like, and how they're assessed, and it's kind of the machine readable version of controls. And so this is awesome. This is an awesome thing for Paramify to come upon, because we could say we're going to base our platform based on OSCAL. And then from there, we can use OSCAL to deliver compliance deliverables, whether or not that particular company was ready to ingest OSCAL. But when, and it's just perfect for us. And so once we had our first version of Paramify going, which was just like, you couldn't log in, like we could log in, we were able to start producing these things, right? So going from a moderate package to a FedRAMP high package, and based on our risk solutions framework, it became really easy. So let's look at what's some of the differences FedRAMP Moderate or FedRAMP High. I'm sure I'm going to get like a lot of hate for this, but for the most part, there are some really important things. But some of the things you might see are something like, you guys, I don't know, at your company's security awareness training, that was probably like,
It was big. Previous 2 companies I worked at.
Yeah, security awareness training. So this is like, okay, this is a computer, guys, and bad things can happen with the computer. They're very basic, right? Like, security awareness training. And they've gotten a lot better than what they used to be. But essentially with everybody, like SOC 2, ISO 27001, FedRAMP, whatever it is, they're going to require some kind of security awareness training that you're educating people about it. Now for FedRAMP High, they're going to have, or DoD, they're going to have extra scrutiny on what are you doing to reinforce, that security awareness training. So like exercises where they'll like send you phishing emails, right? To your email, and like you click on it and it said, oh, you lose, and you have to redo like a training or something like that. I don't know how effective that is, but that's for.
My previous company sent them all the time. They would. Only one time did I fail.
Very good.
And it never happened again. And it was like, yeah, you failed. Do better. But they would try to trip us up about once every. It was random, but it felt like about every 3 weeks.
Do you remember any of those? Like the
They were always phishing, and it was always something like, hey, someone's accessed your OneDrive file, or someone deleted your file. Log in here to do that, or someone's requesting access to your file, or just things like that.
Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe they are, but those reinforcing activities are going to be more important for FedRAMP. And so most of our companies were already doing that because they're implementing risk solutions, right? Like, oh, so what do they're already doing that, right? Because it's the right thing to do to make that awareness train and reinforce it. And so when you upgrade from FedRAMP Moderate to FedRAMP High, it's like it's already done, right? You've taken care of that already. You've already implemented that. And so we're really big on where we were so excited about Paramify was, hey, how do you build a legit information security strategy? And how do you keep it basic and simple so that it's something that it's easy for us to get a grasp around, get our hands under? And
is part of that also making it easy? Because there's different departments. Like some companies, they're huge. And so it's the whole company that has to get certified.
Sometimes,
And so as part of the beauty of risk solutions and simplifying it and making it reusable is that you can apply it here, but so can this department and so can that department.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. We used to call it like grandma's cookbook of, how to implement security. And, a cookbook is going to have all of the, all of the newspaper article cutouts, and then like the little notes from grandma that say, don't add too much salt here. And so that's kind of what we look at as our platform solutions. And the good thing is now that they've been used, over years and in multiple audits, those get better and better, and we get feedback on those. And so we're really excited to we'll be sharing these with the community, and you'll be making these solutions better and better, and tying those to actual services like Okta, and, it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Can you give an example of how different users, customers might make a risk solution better? What is a tweak?
So, I wish that, maybe we can put up a diagram, when we put this up, right? So risk solutions, those get deployed, right? So a risk, let's say, sorry, I just hit the mic on accident. Sorry, Dalton. Okay. So a risk solution.
Improvement.
Yeah. Let's say that one of our risk solutions at Paramify, right, is how we implement SSO. Right. So we use AWS SSO. Okay. and we have that synced with our Google directory. Okay. And there are some steps that we have to implement that, but that gives us a lot of help, because now when Google directory, when someone gets removed or access gets deprovisioned, then now they can't log in, can't log into AWS resources.
Domino effect.
Okay.
Cut it here and it's
Yeah. Okay. That's a pretty common solution that you see with all sorts of different configurations and components. Okay. And so what we'll do is that risk solution gets deployed in the wild, and then when something bad happens, or maybe there's just a ton of friction around maintaining it, as those get used, you get feedback from people who are using that solution. They say, hey, this really stinks, or this should be better. And then you can just update the risk solution, right? And then you share that with others. And so you're improving, how it gets deployed, how it gets adopted. And you do that for your entire library, but you're doing it. It's not just like one GRC person that's doing it. These get distributed to the right people, to the people who are actually implementing it and the people who are using it. And so that way you just don't have one person that's dictating how should your security program be implemented, things like that.
That's cool. So with like the risk solutions, it really makes security like a team effort.
Absolutely. Totally.
Community, even outside of your team, all the teams working on it could be improving it for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, we can talk a little bit about, why do risk solutions, why are they so effective, that's how we set up our security program, is around what are the solutions that help us from top to bottom implement security. And it just works. It works at big companies. It works at small companies.
One of the things you mentioned a few minutes ago was the automation, security automation packages that people use don't work, and that's why they were going to you. So why do risk solutions work, and how do those ones not work? Yeah,
so I think, so I will say that there are some awesome companies out there. Like I'm a big fan of what Drata's doing and what Vanta's doing. They're really making things a lot better. That's not essentially what Paramify is doing right now. We're a strategy risk solutions platform. That's what we are. Okay, so what happens when you don't think about how to implement security and you just say, hey, someone else do this for me? That's abdication. That's what that is. That's not delegation. That's abdicating it. Right? So there's no easy button, and I think people there will be the first to tell you there is no easy button. You can't just press a button and turn security on. You can't. Why? Well, because threats are always changing. Components are always changing. Standards are changing all the time. And what does that mean? There's developer work that has to happen to support, changes. And that just kind of tends to break things, So every little check, let's say that you check, one thing that's pretty common that you see is like, let's make sure that, let's use some sort of cloud access service broker, security broker or something, CASB. Let's have something that checks into your AWS account to see if MFA is required for your root user. Okay, because the root user could basically delete your entire environment. Right? They could do whatever they want, right? The root user. And so one thing that some of these tools will do, and this is actually a lot faster now and better now, and AWS even has this, but where they're going to go and check to see, is that MFA turned on for your root user? But just think about that. There's so many different use cases. All of those solutions and those integrations have to be developed and maintained. And sometimes they need to have even sensitive permissions. sensitive permissions in the environment. So there's all sorts of there are all sorts of problems that get introduced, with like, hey, let's have something that automates to check if the firewall's turned on, and I think that that's where we're going. There's a lot of security tools, and so what we thought is that, well, it's probably not like a one place, one ring to rule them all security solution that's going to know everything. What you need to have is an API centric. You need to have an API centric solution that is focused on actual capabilities. Right. So we would take the thing of like, well, what do you need to do? What are you doing right now? Well, this is I could when I was going through my like MFA solution and when I was going through SSO, we were building out Paramify. I'm like, oh well, this is what we do, and so I could Paramify my solution and tailor it exactly to how we have that. And then I have from that solution, I have procedures that get attached to that. And then we can attach evidences to those procedures and so on, right? It's just kind of a better way to look at it versus like tagging it to a particular, control requirement from some compliance regime.
Yeah. So this is a little bit off topic.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious.
Okay.
So how was the name Paramify created? Like,
oh my gosh, man. Tyler, like that naming, I think Dalton's doing our stuff today. Dalton probably remembers when I first came on, started building it with Tyler, we were called Native GRC. And that was a name that was given to me by my friend Matt. And Matt was like, oh yeah. And I was like, yeah, this is good enough. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good. And we'll just do that. We're native. Like whatever you're doing, that's what we're going to apply GRC to. And GRC is governance, risk, and compliance. And no one knows what that means still. So you just know. And so we just call it GRC. But it's like, what do we do? And, governing policies and, how do we address risk? And then how do we comply with our policies and, which are hopefully addressing risk. So anyways, that's a terrible definition. So I think I saw a good one the other day on LinkedIn, but I can't remember who did it. So anyways, we thought through so many names, but ultimately what came to us was, hey, we want to give people a configurable security strategy. And you're going to just fill in the parameter with however you implement SSO. You're just going to kind of fill that in, whatever that needs to be. And so it's flexible. And so we thought we were like kind of going parameters. It's param like I think I said Paratus and oh my gosh, some really embarrassing ones. Parampit. Can you imagine? I don't know.
Hey, we're Parampit.
Oh my gosh. Like I think we're just messing with names and
yeah.
I can't believe I thought, oh, that could work. And talk to my son's kids, like friends, like they were all playing Xbox one day. They laughed. Like, that's terrible. And then Declan, who's my youngest, 9 years old, he still trolls me about that. Remember when you wanted to call it Paramify? Yeah. Yeah, it's embarrassing. But Tyler goes, oh yeah, Paramify.com is available. You want it? And I'm like, yes, I want it. And we're like, yes. And we were like so excited about it because we thought that's great. Because I thought that it made a ton of sense for what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so it all stems from parameters.
Yeah, that's
cool.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, configurable, right? Just flexible, right?
Paramify,
but there's guidelines.
Provides you with, ask you the right questions, and then you just, those are the parameters that you as the user enter, and then spits out.
That's right.
Solution.
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of what it does. Yeah, and we're making it easier and easier and easier and more flexible, and we'll be integrating with so many cool services in the future. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, man. How long have we been going on this one? What?
30 minutes.
My gosh.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you're still with us.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So like the objective here of, this podcast is to kind of help Keaton and Adam become conversational experts in cyber, and it's going to take a while. You don't learn it overnight, but that's kind of the direction we're going. So appreciate you guys listening. And if you're still listening, I'm super surprised, but
we're impressed. No, you're going to become experts with us if you're not already.
Yeah,
so
absolutely, easily.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Awesome. Yeah. We need to really come up with an outro.
Yeah. See you next time.
Yeah. See you guys.
Ciao.